This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the U.S. and Israel carry out an historic test of the Arrow 3 anti-missile system, while Iran continues to threaten the end of the Jewish state. Plus, the story of rise and kill, Israel's strategy to get its enemy before they attack, and the story of U.S. President Truman.
Truman had to decide, will I support Israel or not?
All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The U.S. and Israel successfully tested Israel's Arrow 3 ballistic missile defense system. The test that took place over Alaska has given Israel confidence in its capabilities to counter regional threats. It also follows Iran's recent test of a medium-range ballistic missile. Historic and unprecedented. That's what the U.S. and Israel are calling the test results of the Arrow 3 weapon system. U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman joined Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the weekly cabinet meeting. Netanyahu addressed what he called the recent pioneering secret experiments.
They were successful beyond any imagination. The Arrow 3, with complete success, intercepted ballistic missiles beyond the atmosphere at unprecedented altitudes and speeds. The execution was perfect, all precise hits.
The results were extraordinary. We're very proud of our partnership with the State of Israel, the funding that we provided for this, the technical expertise that we added.
The test comes at a time of growing tension between the U.S., Britain, and Iran. The Arrow weapon system was tested against targets that behave like the ballistic missiles Iran is developing.
Today, Israel has the ability to act against ballistic missiles that could be launched against us from Iran or anywhere else. This is a great achievement for the security of Israel. All our enemies should know that we will overcome them in both defense and offense.
Israel transported and deployed the Arrow 3 system to Alaska to test capabilities that could not be tested in Israel. 10 years in the making, the Arrow 3 ballistic missile defense system is designed to intercept ballistic missiles outside the Earth's atmosphere, like intercontinental ballistic missiles. The test also proved the Arrow 3 can operate together with the U.S. radar system. The Arrow 3 is the highest level of Israel's four-tier missile defense system. That includes the Iron Dome, David Sling, and the Arrow 2 weapon systems. Besides the successful test of the rocket, defense officials Netanyahu and Friedman hailed a close cooperation and strategic partnership between the U.S. and Israel.
This is an extraordinary and an unprecedented example of the cooperation between our two great countries. And from here, may we continue to go upward and onward in making the world a safer place.
While the U.S. and Israel tested the Arrow 3 in Alaska, in the Persian Gulf, there remains a tense standoff between the United States, the U.K., and Iran. Recently, Iran seized a British-owned oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz. The strait is one of the most significant waterways in the world, since 1/5 of the world's oil passes through this body of water. Iran claims it's responsible for the strait, but U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo promised Iran won't close it down.
Yeah, we're going to keep them open. We're going to build out a maritime security plan. Countries from all across the world who have a vested interest in keeping those waterways open will participate. It will take more time than we wish it would take, but I'm very confident that the world understands its importance, that America is prepared to be a significant part of that, but we need countries from all across the world to assist us in protecting commercial transit.
Israel also sees Iran as a growing threat. It's been reported recently in a rare move that Israeli F-35 warplanes bombed Iranian-backed militias inside Iraq. It's one more front line in Israel's effort to keep Iran from bringing military equipment like ballistic missiles within range of Israel. The attack is not surprising, since from its very beginning, Israel has faced extermination from its enemies. It's fought back in a number of ways, including the controversial use of assassinations. A recent book explains why this deadly technique plays such a part in Israel's history. The book is called Rise and Kill First: The Secret History of Israel's Targeted Assassinations. Award-winning journalist Ronen Bergman told CBN News the title comes from an ancient Jewish writing he heard quoted by members of Israel's intelligence services.
They used the phrase from the Babylonian Talmud, which says, if someone comes to kill you, rise up and kill him first. The mindset which says, when every decade your prime nemesis, your chief adversary, your main enemy, declares publicly that its main goal is to destroy Israel, then there's no other choice but rise up and kill him first.
Since its founding, that's been the public goal of Israel's enemies, from Saddam Hussein to Yasser Arafat to Iran's Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
All of these, when they are your enemies, you will do whatever you can to defend your country and your people.
Bergman says after the Holocaust, Jews followed 3 lessons that permeate Israel's intelligence services.
First is that there will always be a Gentile who is after us to kill us. Second, all or most of the other Gentiles will not help, so we can rely only on ourselves. And third is that we need to have a safe haven, a refuge, a country of our own to defend it, and to defend it with all means possible.
In his book, Bergman explains the secret that makes Israel's intelligence the best in the world.
But there's one extra thought, and that thought is that they are the guards on the wall. They are, if borrowing a phrase from Star Trek, they are the final frontier, guarding the safety of the country and the security of the citizens of Israel and Jews worldwide, not just in Israel. They believe that if they don't work today with everything they have, then tomorrow Jews are going to be killed.
Bergman's book takes readers through how Mossad chief Meir Dagan urged Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and then Defense Minister Ehud Barak to use assassinations and cyber warfare against Iran instead of bombing its nuclear facilities. He also describes the elimination of Hezbollah commander Imad Muniyah, the most wanted terrorist in the world, and how Yasser Arafat escaped dozens of assassination attempts. We asked about the dilemma of targeted killings.
There are 2 questions that are relevant. Is it effective and is it legally and morally justified?
Targeted killings remain an intense debate, and only Israel's prime minister can approve them. Yet with all its success, Bergman quotes one ex-Mossad chief who summed up their dilemma.
At the core of what we did every day in Mossad was that dilemma of what does a democracy under grave threats allow itself to take and do to defend its citizens, while it knows that it's unfortunately might violate other values.
Bergman's book took 8 years to write and includes more than 1,000 interviews.
I wanted to show how unique Israeli intelligence is, but how entangled its history is with the history of the country.
Bergman, the son of 2 Holocaust survivors, sees it as a contribution to the ongoing remarkable story.
Sometimes I walk in the streets of Israel and I say, this is really a miracle. I think what was achieved here during the last 110 years, since the early 20th century, can not be described as nothing but a miracle. And I'm so happy to be part of that.
Coming up, thousands of immigrants are expected to arrive in Israel this summer. Take a look at how life begins for new immigrants. Some 3.5 million Jewish people from around the world have immigrated to Israel since its founding in 1948, and thousands more are arriving this summer, returning to their ancient homeland, just as the prophets foretold. In this recent report, CBN's Scott Ross met some of those new immigrants at their first home in Israel, and he talked with them about why they came.
They come from all over the world to a place many have never been. Yet the Jewish people have longed to return to this land for thousands of years.
Hi, my name is Debbie. I'm from Córdoba, Argentina.
I'm Nikita
from Russia.
Hi, my name is Gadi. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I made Aliyah in December. I'm a lawyer in New York, and I'm here because it's the only Jewish state there is.
It's called Aliyah, literally going up. Taken from biblical times, the term describes when people went up to Jerusalem to worship at the temple. Now it means immigrating or returning to Israel. I spoke with Natan Sharansky, former leader of the Jewish Agency, which oversees bringing the Jewish people home. Sharansky made headlines in the 80s as a political prisoner in the former Soviet Union. International pressure led to his release, and he immigrated to Israel in 1986.
I meet with a lot of new immigrants, and I love to be in the airport and to see this moment of them going down from the airplane, because you think that after each of these people, there are at least 50 generations of Jews who are praying and dreaming about coming to Jerusalem. And each of them is closing a huge circle of 1,000 years of exile.
Biblical prophets Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all spoke of a time when God would bring the Jewish people back to the land of Israel. The prophet Amos says they'll never be dispersed again. Although they're part of a prophetic and exciting journey, immigrants face a whole new world when they arrive.
Some of the people left everything. Left the friends, left families, left the smell, the food, the jobs, all the things that they knew, they're coming here and they start a new life.
That's why the state works to create a smooth transition. Ziva Avrahami leads Beit Canada, Opan Etzion, an absorption center in Jerusalem. New immigrants live here free for 5 months so they can focus on learning Hebrew and living in Israel.
We call them the first home in the homeland. They're coming here and they have like a soft landing.
How important is it that they learn Hebrew?
The main reason that the people are here in this absorption center is to get to know the language. The Hebrew is the key to the Israeli society. If you want to be part of Israel, if you want to be the leader of this beautiful country, you need to know the language.
Opan Etzion is mainly for millennials who have a university degree. You could say it's like a prophetic melting pot. Are there conflicts between them, culturally, socially, adapting and adjusting to one another?
Yes. They're different people for different places. The culture is different. The language is different. A lot of people are becoming friends for life.
Do the majority of them then stay in Israel?
The first year and the second year are the hardest one. And if you survive the 2 years, people are staying in Israel. This is going to be their home.
I spoke with some of the students about their experiences.
It's the land of the Jewish people, and that is why I'm here. I want to essentially come home and to be with my fellow Jews and to please God find a Jewish husband.
Well, I came to Israel because I feel this is the homeland of the Jewish people, and for the first time in 2,000 years we have our own homeland and we can build a prosperous Jewish state.
Do you want to get married?
Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm here in Israel. There's plenty of beautiful Jewish girls, and let's hope I can find one of them.
I asked Sharansky if he thought all the Jewish people need to come home.
Our prophets speak about it very clearly, about this grand design of ingathering of the people of Israel in the land of Israel. And I want to help the people to make this decision not by giving orders, not by pushing them, even not by shaming them, but simply by giving them the feeling how good it is.
Scott Ross for CBN in Jerusalem.
Up next, President Harry Truman's tough decision to recognize Israel. President Harry Truman recognized the State of Israel just minutes after it was declared a nation. Author Craig Von Busick's new book takes us behind that tough decision.
In May of 1948, as the British Empire withdrew from Palestine, 5 Arab nations sat on the border, ready to invade. The Arabs had 22 countries. They wanted one more, the one the Jews call home. Author and speaker Craig Von Busick believes it's important for people everywhere to know the full story and truth behind the rebirth of Israel. In his book, I Am Cyrus, Craig recounts the Jewish fight for statehood and the critical moment when an American president fulfilled prophecy.
All right, first of all, what made you so passionate about writing about President Truman?
Well, you know, Harry Truman started a business with a friend of his from Kansas City. It was a men's clothing store. And his friend's name was Eddie Jacobson, and he was Jewish. And the business did well the first year, but then there was a post-war recession after World War I, and they had to go out of business, but they remained friends throughout their lives, like brothers. And when Harry Truman came into the White House, imagine stepping into the shoes of FDR and all of the decisions that needed to be made. And so one of the major decisions was what to do about the 1.5 million Jewish refugees, displaced persons. These were survivors. We talk about the 6 million who died in the Holocaust, but there were still 1.5 million in the concentration camps, and they had nowhere to go. And they did a survey with them, and over 90% said, we want to go back to our homeland, Eretz Israel, which the world at that time called Palestine. And so Truman had to decide, will I support Israel or not? Almost all of his advisors, including his Secretary of State, George Marshall of the Marshall Plan, said, don't recognize the Jews, don't recognize the new state. We need Arab oil because we may be facing the Soviet Union in World War III. And so Truman was under a tremendous amount of pressure, actually had people who were rude to him in the State Department, some of the Jewish leaders, some of the Arab leaders. And so he said, that's it. And he closed the doors. He said, I'm not talking to anybody else. Well, the vote was coming up in the United Nations. This was in 1947, whether or not there would be partition and a new rebirthed nation of Israel. Nobody knew what Truman was going to do, and the Zionists were panicking. And so they didn't know who to call. And then somebody said, you know, he has a friend, his old Jewish business partner, Eddie Jacobson. We need to call him. So they called Eddie, woke him up in the middle of the night, and Eddie got on a plane, went to the White House unannounced, walked in, and Truman's secretary said, well, just don't talk to the president about Palestine or the Jews or anything like that. And Eddie Jacobson said, that's the whole reason that I'm here. And he walked into that office, and Truman, for the first time in their lives, kind of put a cold shoulder up and froze him out. And Eddie was like, what do I do? What do I do? And he saw a statue on Truman's desk of Andrew Jackson, who was Truman's hero. And he said to President Truman, you know, you've told me all our lives about your hero, Andrew Jackson. Do you know who my hero is, Harry? And President Truman said, no, Eddie, who's your hero? He said, my hero is Chaim Weizmann, who was the Benjamin Franklin of the Zionist movement. And he said, he wants to see you. He's an old man, he's almost blind, he's sick, and he's waiting to see you, but you won't see him, Harry, because some of our other leaders were rude to you? That doesn't sound like you, Harry. Not the guy I knew. I thought you could take the heat in this place. So Truman turns his chair around, looks out over the White House lawn, he's tapping his finger on the desk. Finally he turned back and he said, okay, you bald-headed bleepity bleep, set up the interview. And they snuck Chaim Weizmann in so the press wouldn't know. And it was in that meeting with Chaim Weizmann and Eddie Jacobson that Truman made his decision to support and recognize the nation of Israel. And that's what I Am Cyrus is all about.
Still ahead, we pay tribute to a faithful servant and longtime pillar of CBN, Ben Kinchlow. Ben Kinchlow was the beloved co-host of CBN 700 Club, along with Pat Robertson, for 17 years. Kinchlow, an American evangelist, went home to be with the Lord in July. Here's a small tribute to a great man.
Ben Kinchlow, the beloved co-host of the 700 Club for nearly 2 decades, died in the early morning hours on July 18th. Known for his great sense of humor and warm personality, his friendship with Pat Robertson and fellow co-hosts made for fun, often unpredictable shows. The son of a Methodist minister, Ben served 13 years in the U.S. Air Force, and after accepting Christ in the 70s, directed drug and alcohol rehab programs in Texas and founded a ministry for teens. After being invited to speak on the 700 Club, Ben was asked back to host the program.
Well, you didn't know you were going to be a host. You thought you were just coming down from Killeen to be with us.
Exactly. I had no idea, no clue.
So you came here thinking what, that you were going to just help with the phones or something?
No, yeah, I thought I was going to be out in the audience. You see, we had a director, and he would be out there with the people and say, you know, Pat, on the cell, we just got a call that came in from somebody. You know, and I could do that, right?
Yeah.
No big deal. So I'm sitting out there, and then I'm doing that, you know, and then, you know, I'm shaking hands with the council. Hey, how you doing? So good to see you. What a pleasure to be and everything. You know, and I said, no, the floor director kept looking at me. And I thought, wonder what he's looking at. But anyway, I just kept shaking hands. And I said, Mr. Kendrick, we got about 2 minutes before air. Would you take your place? So I thought, well, they want to hear some more of my testimony. So I went over and sat down in the guest chair. Yeah. And I was sitting in the guest chair, you know, and just looking out there going, hey, how you doing? And he kept looking at me real strangely. And I said, Mr. Kendrick, we got about a minute before we go on the air. Would you please take your place? And I thought, you know what? This would be a great time to ask where my place is. So I said, well, where am I supposed to sit? He looked like I'd punched him in the belly. He said, what? They didn't tell you? I said, tell me what? I said, Pat and Henry and Israel, you're the host of the 700 Club.
This led to a full-time co-hosting slot, and he also assumed the role of helping start Operation Blessing.
He called me up here and we talked about this vision he had from the Lord. Lord, the Lord gave me Isaiah 58. And he said, we're going to go out and help the poor. We're going to feed the hungry. And we're going to send. He said, that's great, Pat. That's absolutely spectacular. He said, yes, we're going to call it Operation Blessing. I thought, man, that's great. I'm sitting over in a chair like this. I said, Pat, that's just great. He said, we're going to call it Operation Blessing. I said, that's great. He said, yeah, and you're going to be in charge.
Yeah, he's pretty good at that, you know.
Famous for his engaging interview style, he also loved the opportunity to share Christ with the viewers of the 700 Club.
You can say, Lord Jesus, come into my life. He'll change your life. He'll give you what you've really been looking for all of your life. And yes, all of those pieces that are missing, you're saying, why doesn't this satisfy me? Why am I still have this nagging longing for something? It's Jesus.
Ben was a good friend, and while we'll miss him and pray for the God of all comfort to comfort his family, we'll also look forward to seeing him again. That's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.